Where's the countdown?
Seems like we are live. Good afternoon, good morning, good day, wherever you are in the world. If you are watching on Facebook, on Twitter, or what's the other platform? IG. Please indicate, tell us where you are watching from. We are here this afternoon in South Africa. It's afternoon. We are talking all things menstrual hygiene, menstrual health, and action for women's health webinar. So our hashtag is free to bleed, Menstrual Hygiene Day, and Menstrual Health Matters. So wherever you are, just do the hashtag, share the broadcast, please mention your friends. This is going to be so informative. So my name is Lucy Pearl. I'm an award-winning women's health activist, executive board director from Sexual and Reproductive Justice Coalition. I'm a founder at Women's Health Ecclesia, PhD scholar in public health, and I'm a medical anthropologist. So, welcome to our Menstrual Health and Action for Women's Health webinar hosted by Soul City in South Africa. Guys, we are live. Please, please, please share the broadcast. I don't see action. I don't see what's going on. So, please, please, please. So, I wanted to give us a bit of a background on why this day and why are we celebrating this day specifically. So please just indicate if you are here so that we see people are here. Any comments, any hello, I'm joining from Joburg, from Cape Town, KZN. I'm not seeing any comments before we start. Nothing. I don't see any comment. Hey, we're good, right? People in the studio, we're good. Good. Yeah, I want to make sure that all the audience are following. So if you did not catch this, you'll catch it on the recording. But I want to emphasize that on the 28th of May, which is this coming Sunday, the global health communities commemorate the Day of Action for Women's Health as well as Menstrual Hygiene Day. But some organization, they call it actually a Menstrual Health Day. So from Hygiene Day to Health Day, we'll talk about that when we go down with things, like how did we shift from hygiene to health and why we are intertwining the hygiene and health together, which is very important in this matter. So I will just highlight a brief background both on menstrual hygiene and a day for action for women's health, which is important to give you a background before you relax, have your coffee, your juice, your energy drink, anything. Just relax and get ready to engage with us. We're not here to tell you, we are here also to hear what you think, and we can engage with you as much as we can. So when we look into periods, guys, are normal. Normal as you sleep and wake up the next day, normal as I'm breathing, normal as I'm stretching my hand, normal as I'm walking. It's a normal biological process. But yet, when we look around the world, people who are menstruating, guys, are still excluded, are still stigmatized, are still shamed, simple because of this biological process thing called menstruation. I don't want to talk about the myth, the taboos about period, are harmful, and not only for girls, women, or people who menstruate, but to all of us, whether you menstruate or not. So please bear that in mind, that all of these myths and all of these taboos affect us all at the end of the day. And while we are unpacking the conversation, everything will be popping out. You're like, okay, Lucy meant that. So just chill, relax. So the 28th of May is Menstrual Hygiene Day, the annual global day of awareness and action to create a world where no one is left behind. Because by the 2030, there is a UN Sustainable Development Goal that we want to achieve a level of health, we want to achieve a level of access, especially when it comes to specific human rights. So this is the part of the agenda when we are saying Menstrual Hygiene Day. Candice normally say, you can play a role. Don't say it's a special day for Lucy's, for activists, for NGOs and NPO. As an individual at home, you can play a big role when it comes to Menstrual Hygiene Day. We'll talk about that when we go down. So it's just an important background to someone who's sitting at home and saying, what is this menstrual hygiene day? So the menstrual hygiene day was started by the Wash United, which is in Berlin-based non-organization, which the main thing, it was to create a world in which all people benefit from drinking water, sanitation and hygiene, which is called WASH. All different countries, we all have our WASH department, which is the water, sanitation and hygiene. With the core focus in this one, it was on menstrual hygiene. However, the agenda now has shifted. It is menstrual hygiene. We still see the sanitation part and the important, but however, there's more pressing now on health and human rights, which is super exciting. And as I'm talking to Candice and Nokuzola today, we'll be touching on those so that you have a better idea. What is this menstrual hygiene day and why are we celebrating or commemorating this day? On the other hand, the Day of Action for Women's Health in 1987, during a reunion for members of Women's Global Network for Reproductive Rights, on that day, the 28th of May, it was declared as an International Day of Action for Women's Health. And then in 1999 in South Africa, that day was officially recognized. So all the sexual and reproductive networks, they stand together in solidarity for social justice. So wherever you are at home, we are not just commemorating these days to make noise. We want to be seen. We're seeking attention. Always remember that we are standing in solidarity for social justice, which is important. It's actually quite interesting to see that these both issues are actually commemorated on the same day, and they are directly intertwined. They are affecting one another. They exist under the same umbrella, which is quite interesting. And in most cases, I was saying to this other friend, in 2020, when we were commemorating menstrual hygiene management, the momentum was not as much as it is in 2023. So there is a global improvement where people are partaking and raising awareness and making a difference wherever they are, which is very important. So the Soul City Institute is committed to advancing the health and wellness of women, girls, and people. As a result, today we are having this webinar commemorating these 2 days in advance. And then today's webinar will be focusing on menstrual health and how stigma creates the barriers to access when it comes to menstrual health. So chill, relax, keep commenting, tell us where you're watching from, and relax, guys. We need all of these, engagement from you, because this is important and it's a topic that affects all of us, not NGOs or activists, but all of us. So just to be clear, before we start with the webinar, the Soul City started this webinar to achieve these objectives, which mainly to highlight the urgent need to destigmatize menstruation and to make menstrual health product accessible. Also to highlight how poor sexual and reproductive health impact the lives of women, girls, and people. So you're sitting at home, you must have this big idea that it's not ending here on webinars, it's not ending on the talk, but there's action on the ground, which is why we brought the people like Candice to come talk about the impact and the action work that they are doing on the ground. And most importantly, to assert that being free to bleed without fear of judgment and without having to have the choice on which menstrual product you want to use, and also to achieve gender equality. Guys, I am not alone. So today I have phenomenal 2 young women. Nokuzola is still having connectivity issues, but we believe that she will join in at any given time when she's able to join. And these young women, they are activists, they are on the ground, they are founders of NGOs, and they are doing great exploits. Guys, give them 5 years. I always say, give them 5 years. You will see. We are creating our own Winnie Mandelas. We are creating our own great legends that one day young girls will say, I want to be like Mama Candice. That time, Candice, you'll be 70 years old and you'd have left a great mark internationally. So let me introduce Candice as part of our panelist, and Nokuzola is coming So I'll just read both their bios just in case. So we are catching up, right? So on the comments, don't forget hashtag free to bleed, hashtag menstrual hygiene day, hashtag menstrual health matters. Okay. So we'll be able to retweet what you are, your thoughts on Twitter. We'll read your thoughts as well on Facebook and on Instagram. So Candice, I always say doctor to be and professor to be. Guys, Candice is doing a PhD at the University of Witwatersrand. Okay, so we are having people who come with an activist side and also comes with an academic side of things, which is very important. So Candice is an award-winning activist. She is an academic, an author, a TED speaker, podcaster, social entrepreneur, affectionately known as Minister of Menstruation. Candice educates youth on menstrual education with the award-winning NGO Create. You can check it all over social media platforms. They're doing amazing things. Even right now, they were in Bombela in one of the schools doing a menstrual talk there. So Candice, guys, is on the ground. She's also an author. She has written 3 books: The Perils of Patriarchy, The Flow, and the book about menstruation. And she also contributed on the book V, an empowering celebration of the vulva and the vagina. So guys, Candice is on the landscape, this side there. She's just there and doing the work. So when we're referring to people who are on the ground and people who are writing, and you bring the two combo, we're talking about Candice. So if you are watching outside of South Africa, please do reach out and collaborate with her. Yes. So let me just briefly read Nokuzola's bio. I see that she's not here, but just, when she comes back, so you don't ask us who's Nokuzola. So Nokuzola Ndwandwe is championing access to sanitation, menstrual health, and gender equality. By 2030, Nokuzola Ndwandwe imagines a world that has ended gender inequality and eradicated period poverty by that time. Her path in making this vision a reality is through her activism on the ground. Ndwandwe runs a grassroots organization called Team Free Sanitary Pads. A lot of you are familiar with that organization. And with the NGO, she campaigns for sanitary pads to be made available, to be free. As the name says, free, Team Free Sanitary Pads, that everyone who menstruates has access to menstrual products. And Nokuzola is collaborating with other NGOs to fight gender inequality. So Ndwandwe created an online petition calling for a menstrual health and hygiene management bill, and for the government to prioritize policy and legislation to transform, and also to make sure that all the socio-economic conditions of women and young girls are met. And menstrual health and hygiene management, it is a human right, and everyone should have access to all of these basic things. So guys, Nokuzola has done so much under her name. When we talk about the scrap of VAT on sanitary products, you'll find Nokuzola's name. So she has been there, and we're so grateful that both of you, Candice and Nokuzola, when you are joining us, you may join us today. Yes, please. It's like I got cut. Am I still on? Am I still back?
We can hear you. I was even worried. We can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you, Lucy. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Hi, Candice.
Hi, Nokuzola. How you doing?
I'm well, thanks.
Oh, it seems like someone was trying to call me, and okay, life is happening. Life is happening. Yes. So Candice, I'm on. Oh, amazing. Nokuzola, please turn on your video so that we see you. I'm also hearing a background sound. I'm not sure if our technical team, are you guys aware of that? So Candice, here's your first question. How does stigma create that line, that barrier to accessing menstrual health support, including menstrual health care. Just the stigma on its
Yeah.
own, the damage that the stigma is creating.
And I think that is a really important question, because I think when people think of period poverty, they often assume that it's just the lack of access to period products. But in fact, it's the perceptions, the negative perceptions surrounding menstruation that ultimately drive young girls not feeling confident enough to go and seek medical help if they're experiencing any intense period symptoms. When, people who menstruate are in the workplace are experiencing any form of intense period conditions, want to take off leave, they don't have the confidence to do so. And so what that ultimately means is that a lot of menstruators will have to feel isolated. They have to feel as if they have to go through this month to month by themselves, that they don't necessarily have a community of support where they can speak openly around their periods. And this shouldn't be the case, right? Outside of us just trying to advocate for the fact that we need to have the removal of VAT or tax on period products, or the access to period products to be free, I think it also means that we ultimately need to speak about the environment, the world that we're creating, that will support menstruators to feel confident and supported, whether it be at school, whether it be at work, during this time of the month, right? And I think it's just, for me, it's always so fascinating that as society, we see so much negativity around periods. 2 months ago, I was on this popular platform where a majority of the comments were saying, why are we talking about periods? Periods are so disgusting. And I think for me, that made me realize that there's still so much work that needs to be done in ensuring that everyone can feel open enough to talk about periods, because the reality is that people will feel uncomfortable. People will have negative biases. And so there's a lot of unlearning and learning that we need to do so that it doesn't ultimately impact a schoolgirl feeling that she needs to not go to school on her period. It doesn't impact someone who has to go to work and then they're feeling that they can't be as productive because they can't take off leave on their period. There are so many factors and so sort of scenarios that impact menstruators month to month, and it shouldn't be the case.
Absolutely. You know, when it comes to Candice, the actual access, people that will tell you, yo, our public health system is messed up, our this and this. Yes, we see that. But the stigma alone has an impact. And people, they're not ready to address that. They're like, no, Candice is talking about stigma, 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 stigma. And they don't get the importance of that. Because I always say, Candice, it starts at home. So if at home we're not breaking these stigmas and we're expecting the community and the society at large to break stigmas, we're not being realistic. So thank you so much, Candice, for that. And Nokuzola, please indicate if you can hear me. I want to have a special question for you.
Yes, I can hear you, Lucy. Yes.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So Nokuzola, is your video is not on?
I'm having technical issues with the video, so I hope this is okay.
Okay. So, Nokuzola, let's talk about why it's important to talk about menstruation. Because you get people who would say, even today, we still talk about menstruation. What is your agenda, guys? So, just in general, why is it important to still talk about menstruation?
Thank you so much for your question. It's very important that we speak about menstruation, because if we don't deconstruct the narrative and end the taboos around period poverty, I think people will not be aware of the fact that there are young girls out there who do not have access to period products, that there are women in workspaces who, due to gender inequality, as well as gender pay gaps, who cannot afford menstrual products, and also who go through menstrual health related chronic illnesses. So we need to have these important conversations so that we can educate, like Candice was saying, our Minister of Menstruation is saying that it's not just, access to period products, it's also education is important, that we, have these conversations about the fact that we are normalizing the natural biological process that women and young girls and all menstruators go through, so that men can also take initiative and take a stand and have their own menstrual product sanitary drives, educate themselves, but also educate other young boys and other men as well around matters on period poverty. Because period poverty is more than just about access to menstrual products. It's also about access to economic justice. We want more women-led businesses to thrive, and also to thrive on the core of the fact that the issue around here is access to menstrual products. And so when we continue to have these conversations, we actually inspire and encourage more activism around fighting for change, around fighting for transformation in terms of policy, in terms of menstrual leave in workspaces, in terms of policies that accommodate women and young girls during that time of the month. And so the more we have these conversations, the more we get rid of all the barriers that are limiting women from accessing career advancement opportunities, that are limiting young girls from accessing school, quality education. And so, just to round it up, I think the more we have these conversations, the more we ignite change, we drive change, we get more people coming on board, we get buy-in from government, from various key stakeholders, the private sector, and civil society. So it's important that we continue having these conversations until we speak with one voice, until the voices of the voiceless are represented, until leaders reiterate what we are saying at grassroots level on the ground. Thank you.
I love that. When I was reading your bio, actually, you mentioned that by 2030, in line with the UN SDGs. So that's very important. Let's have the conversation. So if you are watching on Facebook, on IG, on Twitter, please hashtag it's free to bleed. Remember our hashtag. And please quote Nokuzola and tag Nokuzola on Twitter, on IG, on Facebook. Get engaged with us. Unfortunately, I don't see any comments here. I don't see who's watching. I don't see how many people in different platforms are watching. So even your questions, I can't see your questions unless our technical team behind the scenes that will be sending us your questions. But thank you so much, Nokuzola. It's beyond getting the sanitary material. It goes beyond to be empowered in the economy, to participate. It goes all the basic facilities that a menstruator must have access to. So let's bear that in mind, and we stand with Nokuzola by 2030. We don't want to talk about these things. It should be settled, right? We are all together in this. Please do tweet and tag us and hashtag us and do all of these things. And we are apologizing for Nokuzola, that her video, you can't say it, but she's just spitting facts there. I wish I was seeing her smiling face when she's saying all of these important points. Because I know she's smiling there. She's smiling. A big smile. Candice, let's come to you. We talk about menstruation. There are so many taboos, right? The stigmas I was talking about at the beginning. There are so many misconceptions. There are many things that guys, when they do, like, oh, really? Did you say that? And people, unfortunately, they still believe those myths. They still believe those things. And it actually limits us as menstruators sometimes, or to participate, as Nokuzola was saying, in specific economic activities, or to participate even in churches, even in other different settings. Yes, I see people on Facebook, they're commenting. Yes, that's good. So please, guys, the hashtag, keep the hashtag. It's happening. So Candice, take us through the misconception about menstruation, things that are just not true, guys. Please, okay? Stop with those things.
Yeah, I think the way I classify period taboos and myths is sort of like fake news. It's a form of misinformation, but the idea of the misinformation is really just as a way to try and get people to be restrictive in terms of their behavior as to what they can and cannot do on their period. And I think that is very problematic, because what it seeks to do is it seeks to perpetuate the same stigma as a way to say we should feel inferior or less than when we're on our period. And again, like I always reiterate the same point, this is something that's a part of us, right? Like you always say, Lucy, you always emphasize to say, when I was born, I didn't go to Home Affairs and apply for my period. And it's the same thing. And so the least we could do is ask society to be at least more sensitive and also respond positively towards our periods. But I think when it comes to the taboos and stigmas and in particular the myths, I think when people read through the long list that exists, all you can do is laugh, but there are some people still to this day who still believe that they cannot swim in the ocean because there's this idea that sharks will eat them. There are still to this day where people believe that if they wear someone else's belt, they'll inherit their period pain. And that is so interesting, even though there's no biological science to it. But yet it's restricting people from just doing what they need to do. There's also this thing that's also very limiting for young girls, where they feel that if they exercise or participate in sports during their period, it'll damage their womb or it'll have a major impact on their life. And there's no evidence that proves that. In fact, there's medical evidence that says when you exercise, it releases a form of endorphins that makes you feel more happier. And so we'd rather have more confident girls who feel that they can do anything whilst they're bleeding, rather than just continuously perpetuating these stigmas that make us feel like we can't do anything. And this is why I think it's so empowering through the way we speak about our periods and the language that we use with the periods, that we understand that it implies something. So people always assume that our period is dirty because we'll always say, oh, hand me that sanitary product. And sanitary implies something needs to be clean, right? But there's nothing to be clean. It's our period, it's our uterine lining shedding itself every single month because our egg was not fertilized. That isn't dirty. That process in itself isn't dirty. And then there's also this responsibility that as women and girls, we must solve period poverty on ourselves because, we have things classified as feminine hygiene products. And that isn't the case. We should call it menstrual products as a way to say it's an inclusive thing. And that will also make people realize that these are products to help us manage our period blood. So I think language also implies the bias and the stigma that we see play out. And this is why, for me, it's so fundamental that we're very aware of that. So at least when we are using these inclusive terms, people will not have any form of hesitation or any form of worry or stigma when we're speaking openly about these things. But still to this day, we find ourselves even on the ground having to demystify these period taboos and stigmas, because still to this day, young girls feel like they can't do X, Y, and Z because they heard it from someone who heard it from somewhere. And it's like, this is how fake news or misinformation spreads. And so when we come into spaces and we say, no, this is actually what you can do, it's so empowering to see that they can actually take control of their life, that they don't have to be restricted by some form of information that they heard and it hasn't even been verified.
Actually, I'm on mute. Great. I like what you said about language. Yeah. I hear people, they're like, sanitary. I'm like, okay. So which means that thing must be clean, hey? Yeah, the term is there, but guys, please be careful how we use the language. That's very important. Thank you, Candice, for that. And I see that Libongwe Shwane, right? Did I pronounce that right? We need to be loud about such issues because they are disregarded and it's so sad. Absolutely. We need to be loud about such topics. I think that was after Nokuzola's comment. Yes, it's very important, Candice, that as much as we are clear about specific issues, especially even with activists, Candice, on the ground, I have to call them out. This is a point of order. There are activists who go around and they are imposing their experiences. For example, if they have a chronic illness connected to menstruation, how they portray it to individual, they make sure that this is it. This is standardized. Always, guys, remember, our menstrual experiences are different. I can be an activist and I had this condition I was diagnosed with. It does not give you a manual of how the condition is and it will be diagnosed to you. So please, comrades, on the streets, please have an open mind and say, this is my experience. But there are other ways, there are other angles, as Candice were talking about at the beginning of the webinar. So it's very nice to have an open mindset and welcome other people's experiences, which is why here in this webinar, we have two activists who have two different backgrounds and who interpret things differently, who see things differently, who have been on this space differently. So activists, it's important to collaborate. It's very much important. And if something it's not your strength, you push it to Candice. You focus towards working for you, which is why we are collaborating. Nokuzola's point, by 2030. Guys, we must achieve gender equality, and such things should be redundant by that time. I see people are commenting. So they said we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Okay, hashtag free to bleed. Nokuzola, we are coming to you now. So let's talk about what are some of the ways that the negative connotation of menstruation, Nokuzola, can have an impact in one's life. Because people will tell you, as Candice was talking about the myth and taboos, yeah, we get it. It's just when someone say this to you, how will it really have an impact? If I'm excluded, as Nokuzola, you were talking, excluded in the workplace and all of that, how is that affecting or having an impact in one's life? I think it's important that we get into the fine details. What's actually happening, guys? So when you do these things, you have a clear idea what you're doing in one's life. Over to you, Nokuzola.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for that very important question. So, as mentioned in the beginning, if there's a negative perception around menstrual health, first and foremost, then it means that women and young girls are, impacted in terms of accessing career advancement opportunities, in terms of accessing quality education. Because, the natural biological process of menstruation is at the core makeup of women, of a normal functioning a young girl, woman, and all menstruators. So if we don't address menstrual health, period poverty, in essence, then it means that we are allowing, limits, patriarchal limits to hinder young girls from accessing quality education and accessing a brighter future. We are hindering women from accessing career advancement opportunities in workspaces where policies do not exist that actually accommodate women, where they create environments where women are able to actually function and be able to thrive and be able to access, their ambitious goals in the workspace, by having access to menstrual products in workspaces, by having access to menstrual products in schools and in public spaces. Because if women do not have access to these opportunities, then it means that, economies will be stagnant. Economies will not thrive. We'll have, because we make up the majority of the population, and we are dealing with unemployment in South Africa currently. And so the majority of the unemployed are women, which shows that the economy is currently struggling because women are not participating, or not due to barriers of entry, and that includes access to menstrual products. So I think if we address matters around period poverty, then we can actually address matters around accessing economic opportunities, getting women out there to access. Can you guys still hear me? Sorry. Getting women out there to access economic opportunities so that they can contribute to a gross domestic product of various nations, but particularly in South Africa, because we are currently struggling with economic growth. So I think if the government and civil society and private sector prioritize menstrual health and period poverty, then that could actually open up many doors in government, in the private sector, in terms of, more women accessing opportunities, which means that South Africa will thrive if women are prioritized and are put forward. And women led businesses are also prioritized, especially in the menstrual health and hygiene space. So that means that if we keep pushing forward for the cause in terms of eradicating period poverty, then we are just one step closer to achieving economic growth in the country and to eradicating unemployment whilst also empowering women and young girls. So I think if we address all these negative perceptions around menstrual health, then we are be able to actually empower the whole country. Because if we empower the majority of the population, then the minority is just, it's not a lot of work to work around the minority once we address matters on women and young girls. I hope I've answered the question.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love the fact the gender equality you've emphasized there. Guys, South Africa, we are still the country that is up there on the map for gender inequality. You know, you can be famous for other things, but not for such. And we are the most unequal country in the world. And that includes race, gender, and other components. So that's very important what you've mentioned. And Nokuzola, you mentioned access to education. And a lot of people downplay this. If guys, you can see the statistics of so many girls who are dropping out of school because they're having a period, either they are not having a menstrual product, or either it's because of pain. Because some teachers will say, you've been missing school every month, you go to your period 5 times, 3 times, 7 times, and all the time, every month, you're missing school, you're likely to fail. And when they fail, they are discouraged just because of pain alone, not just of menstrual products. And if it's menstrual products, because you can't go to school without putting anything. Some of them do try and have leaves, Candice. Some of them, they have rags. Some of them have all of these unhealthy things and go to school, and it starts smelling. When they cake blood, it's now caked. And then they make funny about that, like, oh, you're smelling fishy, oh, you like that. It kills your confidence as a young girl, and you drop out of school. It was so sad when I went to this informal settlement, Candice, to see so many young girls who are like, I don't go to school. You ask, why are you not at school? It's like, it's Tuesday and the time is 11 a.m. You're not at school. They'll tell you, I dropped out. It's so painful, and it's a sad reality. So, Candice, as I'm talking about, you go to school, they laugh at you, and they make their matters worse. Let's talk about the role that boys, men can be involved when it comes to these issues. Because I know you speak a lot about how they can partake, because it's not a woman's thing. You get people saying it's a woman's issue, so I'm not involved. And when I started this webinar, I said, it affects us all. So I think it'll be great if Candice, before Candice, you go, I see Rose is saying, if such issues are shared, it will help to educate and to change the narrative of how society is labeling it. I find it interesting as well. Rose is commenting on Facebook. Please, on YouTube, put your comment. If you are on Twitter as well, please tweet hashtag free to bleed. The conversation is getting lit, super amazing. I see Karabo is saying, this is really what I was looking forward to, hearing someone saying that it's free to bleed. Absolutely free to bleed. Remember to put the hashtag. Candice, over to you.
The thing is, what I find to be really interesting is that when we go into schools or any youth organizations, we always say that we can do education, menstrual education for boys, but there's always this hesitation to include them because they're worried as to how the boys will receive the information. And I'm always of the opinion to say, you know what, I think we'd rather have them in that session. Even if it's terrible, they at least know something. They at least have made some form of there was in that session for an hour, they learned something, and how they choose to receive that information is on them. But at Curate, what we strive to do is we strive to just remove any awkwardness around our workshops and how we present the information through the activities we do, because we believe that because menstruation is such a personal subject, our agenda, like you rightfully mentioned, isn't ours to come in and just speak for an hour and impose our own perceptions. It is to let the participants guide their perspectives, their experiences, and also have fun at the same time to remove that awkwardness and shame. So even when we do our workshops with boys and we have specific activities that will have them included, you'll always find that there's this element of like fascination where they're like, I've seen this tampon or I've seen this pad, but I thought it was something else. I thought the tampon is something I put in my nose if my nose is bleeding, or the pad is something that I see my aunt use as a plaster, because no one is having those conversations with them. And we cannot imagine eradicating period poverty by 2030 if men and boys are excluded from this, because we can't just make it seem like menstruation is only a woman and girls conversation. Menstruation is everyone's conversation, and the only way we can eradicate period poverty is if everyone is on board. If everyone, including boys, including men, are doing their bit to play their role, whether it's in the role as a father, a role as an educator, a role as someone who maybe sits on the board of sanitation, and you're a man, you have a role to play in ending period poverty. And this is just going to be my final point before I leave, because I unfortunately have to get going. What I find to be very fascinating is that so much momentum has been building towards Menstrual Health Day, and after it becomes quiet. But I always tell people, we don't stop menstruating in May. Like, it doesn't just start 1st of May, end of 31st
Come
of May.
on.
We menstruate every month. And what that means is that these conversations have to be ongoing. We have to ensure that the programs, the policies are sustainable enough that we won't find ourselves having these same conversations every single year. So my sort of like call to action, outside of calling corporates and calling government to do something, is everyone that's watching this specific live on Sunday, my question to you is, what are you doing? What is your role? Even if it's an hour, even if it's you going on your phone and donating 50 Rand to an organization, what are you doing as a citizen of this country who knows that up to 7 million girls in South Africa cannot afford to buy period products, who knows that the access to sanitation facilities are terrible, that, just this year alone, 2,000 children have died in pit latrines. These are scary statistics and figures. And so there's something that we need to do that is holistic and sustainable. So my question is, what are you doing? What are you going to do on Sunday? Don't just leave it to us menstrual activists, because yes, we can do this every day, but we also need and require everyday citizens to come in and support us and also support the communities that you live in and exist in. So if you know that there are girls in your area that don't go to school, what are you doing to assist in that situation? If you know that there's a company that provides water, but as part of their CSI, they're not doing anything to provide water to schools, what can we do to lobby? I think there's something that we need to do to provide awareness that can also transform into advocacy, that can ultimately transform into sustainable change on the ground, because we all need the help to do it. So I think that's just maybe like my last comment. What are you doing on Menstrual Health Day? What are you doing to change the conversation? And what are you doing to help? Thank you.
I love that. Thank you so much, Candice. What are you doing? This is actually a challenge. If you're not doing anything, start doing something. Thank you so much, Candice. I'm well aware that you have to be excused. This has been so informative. I will be continuing with Nokuzola just briefly. Thank you so much. I see there is actually a comment there, which is so profound, by Marco Semvelo. Yes. And in my opinion, most of the policymakers are men who are not bothered to ensure that every young woman has access to free period product. So gender inequality plays a huge role in this matter. Absolutely. It's not your opinion, it's in statistics. And when it comes to gender inequality, people mostly who are in these high rooms, in these high esteemed positions, it's men, and it's men of a certain color, because there's also racial gaps and all of those other things. So which is why we are pushing that women must be in leadership. Women must be involved in those important conversations. If you are getting a menstrual product that is designed by women for women, it becomes much easier because they have that thing that, okay, when I design it like this, it sits like this. Not just, for example, with the history of a tampon, we know that when they gave us those plastic applicators, when you insert that thing, they were trying to imply that we don't know our bodies. We needed an extra object, which is a plastic, that will assist you to insert. But now there are tampons, non-applicators that are created by women for women, where we insert with our own fingers. We are literally giving the patriarchy middle finger somehow and saying we know our bodies and we are protecting the environment. We don't need those plastic applicators. In order to save the environment, let us use our fingers to put this thing and to remove it. So I love your comment, Makosenzelo. That was beautiful. So Nokuzola, you're still here, right? We're coming back to you. I just love this.
Yes, Lucy, I'm here.
Yeah, lovely. By Marco Sanvelo. It's so profound. I see someone is saying power to the Free to Bleed movement. Please keep on tweeting, keep on writing on Facebook and YouTube, hashtag Free to Bleed, hashtag Menstrual Hygiene Day, hashtag Menstrual Health Matters. Yes. So Nokuzola, let's talk about the products now, the menstrual products, the importance of quality. Nokuzola, let's talk about the choice of products, because you go into a specific area, maybe in rural areas, and then they tell you, no, that product, it's just scary. There are also taboos and stigmas around specific products. So I'll just leave the question open for you so that you can tackle it one by one. You have all the time. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Okay, first and foremost, I just want to give a shout out to our product, our organic 8-layer menstrual product, dignity, long-lasting inspiration, health from nature. We are committed to fighting for quality menstrual products at grassroots level. Hence, we're fighting for the menstrual health rights law and bill, that it also emphasizes quality menstrual products that are distributed by the government, distributed by civil society, as well as the private sector. Because, we feel that for a very long time, Africa has been a dumping ground for poor quality menstrual products, because, they're probably the first world, probably thinks that we are not deserving of organic quality menstrual products. So we pushed that in our calls as a collective when we marched and we made our demands in August 26, 2022. We pushed for quality menstrual products. We also pushed for product mix as well, like you were saying, Lucy, that we need to eradicate the myths and the taboos around specific products, especially tampons, because there's this belief, misconception that tampons are capable of breaking your virginity, or tampons must not be used by young African girls because of the fact that they do not cater for the needs to, to appease patriarchy, because, women should behave in a certain way and be tamed and not have autonomy over their bodies. And so we're pushing for autonomy over our own bodies as young girls, women, and all menstruators. And so we advocate for a product mix. We are trying to educate women in rural communities in terms of making use of tampons. And for the first time, when I went to distribute menstrual products, I emphasized a product mix, and I educated the young girls on the various products, that this is how you assess or ascertain a period product to see that it works for you and your body, and it works for your flow, your menstrual flow, whether you're a heavy bleeder or a light bleeder, or for nighttime and daytime use. And I specifically mentioned tampons as well, that it's not true that a tampon is capable of breaking your virginity, or that a tampon is capable of readjusting your vagina or the vaginal walls, because a vagina is an organ that actually contracts and expands at its own way, because we're naturally born that way to make use of our organs and to exercise our organs, freely. But it doesn't mean that we should be limited based on, perceptions that have not been tested and that have not been verified by, fact checkers and data as well. So I feel that if we continue to educate young girls and women on the ground on the product mix, then women will be more comfortable to choose what works for them and have autonomy over their bodies. And so once I started educating young girls around tampons, I saw that when I went to one of the shops that the tampons were actually sold out, because now young girls have information and access to education, and they're now more comfortable to make use of a product mix, based on their choices and how they feel about their menstrual cycle. Also, another thing that I noticed is that the more we educated the young girls around menstrual products, with the different use of panty liners and the reusable menstrual products, also menstrual cups, girls were actually also trying to access all these products so that they can have a feel for themselves as to what actually works for them, and not based on what has been passed down by generations. And these intergenerational dialogues as well also need to be challenged, so that there is proper information being passed down from generation to generation. And so I'm a strong advocate over, quality menstrual products on the ground. And when the South African government decides to legislate menstrual health rights, to the point that we all get access to free menstrual products, we want quality, organic, free menstrual products on the ground. Product mix must also be supported with menstrual cups, with tampons, with panty liners, with access to all the necessary material that allows for young girls and women and all menstruators to enjoy that time of the month, to celebrate their bodies, to be comfortable in being a woman, to take charge and be proud of the fact that I'm a woman, I menstruate, but that doesn't limit me from being the woman that I envisage myself becoming. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nokuzola. I think there was an interesting question, not a question, a comment that popped. I can't see it on my screen anymore, but I'm sure our people behind the scenes, they will pick those comments, question as they're coming. Absolutely, Nokuzola. People, we also, when you say the older generation, sometimes because a pad was good for your mom will say, stick to what's good, stick to what I know, and stop inserting things that will break your virginity, or stop using things that we are not sure what it will cause in your body. So it's very important, as you say, that people are now empowered. So there's that dynamic shift when it comes to trying different products. And you mentioned the organic pad, which is not only for access to menstrual products, but it's also protecting the environment. When we are advocating for these different options of menstrual products, I think it's important to bear in mind what are these things doing in our environment. So I love that. So guys, I actually have, before I ask you, Nox, a follow-up question on those organic pads for the people who are listening. Now, guys, we're talking all things period products before we go. I have this menstrual cup is from She Power Foundation. And guys, I want you to see the packaging, which it's so classic. Hey, Noxola, it looks like your eyeglasses type of thing. So this is the cup for those who are at home. Sometimes it's nice, Noxola, to be curious about trying other different menstrual products. People will tell you, I wanted to try a tampon and I thought, oh, it's not for me. How do you know? You've never tried it. How do you know it's not for you? So as you're watching here at home and you have been so interested in trying a menstrual cup or trying a tampon, please do so. And you will be updating us on the hashtag free to bleed and how was it to try a different product. And now we also have all of these different products coming up to protect the environment. So please utilize or use all of those menstrual products as alternative. If you feel like a pad is not working for me, if you feel like a tampon is not working for me, there's always an option or the other option. So I see the comment is not really coming up. So Nokuzola, you mentioned earlier about menstrual leave, and then you mentioned about the menstrual health right bill as well, and then you kept on touching based on the bill and the other policies that can help us to address this issue. So now I want us to tighten all the policies that you think we need in order for us, to eradicate period poverty, in order to fight this social injustice, which is violating menstruators' basic human rights. So over to you, just to bring all of them together. For someone who's sitting at home would say, I hear them, they talk about policies. I hear them, they talk about this bill, but what does it mean? What exactly are they talking about? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. When we touching on matters on legislation and policy drafting, I also want to touch on what you mentioned, the fact that girls are not in school due to the fact that they are menstruating, or the fact that they are being, shamed at school because they're experiencing their periods, or they don't have access to period products, and so therefore they use other methods to try and maintain that monthly cycle. And so when it comes to policy, I think we've come to an agreement as a collective, working with the Department of Women and Young Girls, Department of Women, Youth and Persons Living with Disabilities, other government stakeholders, as well as civil society on the ground and other global organizations dedicated to gender equality, that we have policies in various countries in Africa. In South Africa, for example, we have the Sanitary Dignity Framework, which doesn't cater for girls who are out of school due to affordability concerns. And so we cannot say that we are trying to keep girls in school when the majority of young girls and women are actually outside of school due to affordability concerns, which means that the Sanitary Dignity Framework needs further amendments and expansion when it comes to addressing the broader matters around menstrual health and hygiene management. And therefore, a legislation is more key and has more teeth and more structure in terms of attracting buy-in from the private sector, in terms of attracting buy-in from civil society and from various government departments. Also in terms of addressing matters around the fact that, there are women and young girls who cannot afford to go to school. So what about the women and young girls who cannot afford to go to school? Should they be excluded from accessing free menstrual products? Because if we're saying we're keeping girls in schools, then maybe we should change that narrative and say that we are just fighting to eradicate period poverty so that women and young girls can have access to quality education and access to career advancement opportunities. So legislation should touch base on the fact that girls are out of school, majority of young girls are out of schools already because of period poverty. So we should fight to keep girls going to school by providing for all women and young girls who do not have access to period products, and not just provide for school-going learners, because it's giving being a bit classist, because you're saying that girls who are already at school are more deserving of menstrual products, but period poverty does not discriminate. Even when women are working, they often cannot afford access to menstrual products due to gender inequality and gender pay gaps. And so when we're working around legislation and drafting of legislation, it's important to take into consideration the factors that already are preventing women and young girls from accessing career advancement opportunities, from accessing quality education. we also need to touch base on the fact that the menstrual health related chronic illnesses. And so with menstrual leave, I hear some actually are saying that, well, we don't deserve menstrual leave because that will prejudice women from accessing the actual opportunities that we're trying to fight for. But I think that's not true, because I feel like people are just fighting because this is an unknown to some of them, and they're just trying to figure their minds around what menstrual leave actually means. And menstrual leave means that providing transformative policies in the workplace that accommodate women and young girls. I mean, we hear workspaces speaking about, standing with her. We don't want that to be a performative activism. We actually want action from the private sector. And that means that action involves providing free menstrual products in bathrooms, providing free menstrual health education and awareness around the workspaces, and providing policies that actually allow women to access career advancement opportunities, that actually demonstrate that the employer understands what the needs of young girls and women entail in terms of accessing opportunities and having access to, being functional, ambitious young women and girls. And so we need policy in place that accommodates and that allows and that accelerates eradicating gender inequality. And so it's very important that we get the government working on an actual menstrual health rights bill. And we want this matter to be treated with urgency and not just, sidelining it, creating more frameworks. Okay, frameworks are important as well, but we are saying that frameworks do not have teeth in terms of accountability. I mean, we want to hear of how the government is working around, transparency in terms of ensuring that the beneficiaries who are meant to receive the menstrual product are actually receiving the menstrual product, that the budgets that are set aside and allocated towards menstrual health and hygiene management are actually being used effectively, and that the South African government is actually taking action and implementing these policies, the frameworks that have already been established, aligned with the Menstrual Health Rights Bill and law. So, with the bill and law, it means that we have accountability. We can have grassroots activists championing implementation and accountability. We can have a multi-sectorial approach in terms of accountability, where the private sector also holds government accountable in terms of ensuring that there's really an implementation of the sanitary dignity program on the ground, that school learners are accessing period products, and that school learners are actually improving in terms of accessing quality education, and in terms of the feedback, in terms of how they're performing at school due to the fact that they're now having access to menstrual health, quality menstrual products, quality menstrual health education, and also in workspaces as well. We also want reports and feedbacks in terms of the fact that there's policy in place which is ensuring that women are not held back from accessing career advancement opportunities, from accessing equal pay in the workspace, from accessing opportunities in a sense that there's no longer stigma and shaming in the workplace when it comes to matters around menstrual health and hygiene management. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nokuzola. You've said a mouthful. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm sitting here. I'm like, yes, go on, go on. Yeah. For someone who's watching at home, when Nokuzola is referring to the dignity, to the sanitary dignity framework. So when it was passed down in different countries, all of the sanitation focus, even at the beginning of this webinar, I said it's Menstrual Hygiene Day, but some people now they bring an element of menstrual health day. So when the policies and everything was happening that time, the focus was more on the sanitation and dignity, which we understand where did that come from, and it also came from the World Health Organization. So that was the implementation in South Africa, where researchers contributed to that sanitation and dignity framework, which it looks good on paper. And Nokuzola, beside adding the health and the human right aspect in that sanitation dignity framework, there is no implementation. That framework states that there will be toilet facilities, there will be water, there will be what and what, things that we still don't have, especially if you go to rural areas. You see a lot of these menstruators being excluded, but the framework that is current speaks on that. But to implement, which is important when we call the government stakeholders, that they must push implementation. And now there is a shift across countries or globally or internationally, that there is an element of adding health and human rights when it comes to menstruation, which is why it's no longer just a hygiene issue, but the framework must accommodate the health part of things. As Nokuzola was talking about, the chronic illnesses or conditions such as endometriosis, adenomyosis, fibroid, and you can name, the list goes on and on, which are connected to menstruation. So please, if you are at home, hashtag free to bleed, remember. And guys, this is us. We are closing the webinar. Thank you so much for tuning in on Facebook and on YouTube and on Twitter. We are signing out. Thank you so much. Have a lovely, lovely, lovely afternoon. Remember, Candice challenge you to go out there and make a difference, make a change, do something. Thank you. Bye.